Guys, welcome to another session. So today we are going to begin our discussion on one of the most foundational thinkers in sociology, that's Max Weber. So whenever we talk about Max Weber, we discuss or we write one more line along with him that that the founding father of modern sociology or father of modern sociology. So founding father of sociology, Auguste Comte. When we talk about Durkheim and Weber, we talk about father of modern sociology, right? So you know the difference between what I mean by founding father of sociology and father of modern sociology. So when we discussed Durkheim, he gave sociology a scientific foundation, distinctive scientific sociological explanations. But when we talk about Weber, Weber gave sociology a human face, and he brought the individual aspects, the meanings and the motives, emotions of individual to the center of sociological study. And he introduced micro aspect, micro perspective. So that's why I said he gave sociology a human face. So I hope most of you can write an introduction without any trouble, because we had a lot of discussion on Weber when we talked about positivism, non-positivism, right? And when we discussed about sociology as science and all those. So you know already that he followed micro approach, and his approach and everything is very clear. Here we will be looking at some of the theories and some of the methods. And he's that's why he's one of the founding fathers of modern sociology and the pioneer of interpretive sociology, or what we call as Verstehen sociology. And what is this Verstehen? What is this method and all? We will be discussing in the upcoming session, and we can expect a separate question also on that. Now, before we get into the theories, always remember this. Durkheim explains society in terms of social facts, and like forcing, individual to do something. That means he followed macro approach. He gave importance to society, and you need to study social facts. And these are the social facts, which is influencing you to do certain things, right? And these are forces which are external to individual and general in nature, the characteristics, the rules, everything we studied. Now, Weber, when we talked about, he explained sociology through social action. So Durkheim studied social facts or understood sociology in terms of studying social facts, and he defined sociology as studying social facts. But Weber defined sociology in terms of studying social action. And then he discussed what is social fact, defined social facts. So here also we will see what is social action, how he defines social action and everything. That means the meaningful actions performed by individual is what you need to study. So how you're going to study is you understand the meanings attached by the actor to the action. If I'm taking an action, I'm teaching here, I'm taking an action. So what's the internal meaning which is attached by the actor when I'm performing this action? That's what you need to understand. And if you can study that, you can establish the cause and effect relationship. What is the cause of this action and what is going to be the effect of this action? So according to Weber, sociology is not merely about what people do, but why they do it. And that's why he's stressing on understanding the meanings attached by the actor, you know, when performing an action. So it's not about what people do, but why they do it. You need to understand the meaning. You need to establish the cause and effect relationship. So I hope this much is clear. Let's get into the definition of sociology and definition of social action. So Durkheim defines sociology as study of social fact, and he defines social fact also as the ways of thinking, acting, feeling, external to individual, etc. So here also we follow the same pattern. We define sociology as study of social action, and then we define social action also, right? So how he defines sociology, it's like this. You need to write like exactly this. So sociology is a science. Sociology is a science which attempt at interpretive understanding of social action. So sociology is science and interpretive understanding of social action. Interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at an explanation of cause and effect. So each word is very important. So first, he's starting by saying that sociology is a science. And what sociology is doing? Interpretive understanding of social action. And then what to do by this interpretive understanding? You have to establish cause and effect. So when he talk about cause and effect, he's considering it as science, right? So the definition itself will tell you that there are three key things that you need to focus here. So it's a science. So first, he's starting with sociology is a science. So Weber believes sociology should maintain objectivity and it should have proper method. So sociology is a science. And interpretive understanding. So what does that mean? We must understand meanings attached by the actor to the action. Now, third element, cause and effect. So we study why actions happen and what result it produced. So sociology is a science which aims at interpretive understanding of what social action and what you need to do, establish cause and effect. So what is sociology? Sociology is a science looking for interpretive understanding of social action. What you need to do, establish cause and effect of social action. Now, how can you establish cause and effect? By understanding the meanings attached by the actor when he is performing that action. For example, I am performing this action. How can someone establish cause and effect of this action? If you need to establish cause and effect of this action, you first need to understand the meanings attached by me when I'm performing this action. So you can establish this. Now let's define what is social action. That's the most important part of this discussion, right? So according to Weber, any act is social. Any action you have taken is social by virtue of the meanings attached by the actor to it. Or the definition goes like this. I'm just modifying the definition and talking in my own way. So if I want to go with the exact definition, any act is social by virtue of the meanings attached to it by the actor. It takes into account the behavior of others and and also it's oriented in its course. I repeat, any act is social by virtue of the meanings attached by the actor to it, and it takes into account the behavior of others. So it is also considering others and is thereby oriented in its course. That's the definition part. So two conditions are necessary for any act to become a social action. Not all the acts are social action. So there are two conditions. The actor must attach some meaning when he is performing the action. That means the act should be consciously performed. For example, smiling to greet someone. It has meaning because you are conveying something. And blinking eyes. If you are blinking eyes to one person, right, looking at one person, it might have some meaning, but that can be behavioral action also. Like normally, randomly, if I'm blinking action, you might have seen Saurav Ganguly when he's batting, right? Okay, you might not have seen. Okay, it's not your time, it's our time. So see, the blinking of eyes, this can be behavior. But if you're blinking eyes to someone else, if it have meaning, then it is a social action. So he, separated the behaviors at the same time social action also. So most importantly, meaning must be there. Secondly, it should be oriented towards others. So it should take into account someone else's presence or reaction. So see, that doesn't mean that other person is physically required to be present. It can be, imaginary also. If the orientation exists mentally also, it qualifies as social action. So it's not necessary because you are not here. I'm doing a social action because when I'm taking this action, there is a meaning, right? And it is oriented towards some other people. I know there are some other people who are watching and they are getting some advantage and benefit out of it, right? So that's why I'm performing this action. So what I'm doing here is a social action. It is having meaning. It is oriented towards others. But are you physically present here? No. So that orientation towards others is not necessarily to be like physical orientation, or that other person, it's not necessary that need to be physically present. So I repeat, any act is social by virtue of the meaning attached by the actor. It takes into account the behavior of others and thereby oriented in its scope. So two conditions: actor must attach some meaning to the action, most important, and the act must be oriented towards others. That orientation can be at the imaginary level also, not a physical orientation is absolutely required. So now what is scope of sociology according to Weber? See, from this you can understand the scope of sociology is to understand and interpret social action, not merely observe them. That's what you have seen in the definition: interpretive understanding of social action and establish cause and effect. So what is scope of sociology according to Weber, or how he defines sociology? Sociology is a science looking for interpretive understanding of social action, establish cause and effect. So what is scope of sociology? Understand and interpret social action, or interpretive understanding of social action. So Weber clearly distinguished between sociology and psychology also. So when you talk about psychology, psychology study the internal mental states, but what sociology study is those inner meanings that express themselves in a social context in relation to others. There is a clear difference. Psychology, this you can write when you discuss the difference between sociology and psychology also. So here we are very clear that psychology studies the internal mental state. Weber have very clearly defined. But sociology study how those inner meanings express themselves in a social context. Even Durkheim was giving importance to social fact, but according to Weber, it's all about how individuals interpret the social facts and react upon that. Okay, so this is how you can understand. So again, at the same time, he also reject some actions like mass conditioned actions, like behaviors, like imitations or crowd reactions. When you are in a crowd, when you are watching a movie, everybody is clapping hands. You may also do the same, but that's not a social action, right? As if you talk about true social action, there should be conscious meaning. So when you talk about mass conditioned actions or behaviors, this don't have a conscious meaning. Everyone is doing, you're also doing. I hope this part is also very clear. So he rejected mass conditioned actions from being treated as social action. Let's talk about the method of Verstehen. It's all about interpretive understanding. So they'll ask you separately, and I can discuss this separately also. Here I'll spend a couple of minutes for discussing this. This is a bigger question that we need to answer. How do we understand someone else's meaning? That's a bigger question now, right? Because sociology is about interpretive understanding of social action. And to understand that, you need to understand the meanings attached by the actor to the action. And then you establish cause and effect. So the question here is, how do we understand someone else's meaning? Now, for that, Weber introduced the method of Verstehen. That's a German word which actually means comprehension or understanding. So, guys, when we talk about Verstehen, that basically involve empathetic understanding of the meaning that the actor attached to his action or his behavior. Okay, so Weber basically this is not his original concept, it's nothing but comprehension. So he basically borrowed this concept from philosopher Karl Jaspers, and he applied it scientifically for the first time in sociology. And he explained social or Verstehen on two levels. You need to write like this: direct observational understanding and then explanatory understanding. So direct observational understanding means understanding the meanings through direct observation, right? That means you see someone crying and understanding why they are sad. Direct observational. You saw some accident, you interpret your own understanding. Now, when it comes to explanatory understanding, that's understanding deeper meanings. For that, you need to explore the situation of that individuals, the meanings, the motives, the constraints that individual would have faced. So that's a deeper meanings which are attached to it. Cool. So, for example, if you need to understand why a person is crying, it could be due to grief, loss, or failure. So you'll try to understand the deeper meaning. Okay. So when we talk about Verstehen, it's not about sympathy. It's scientific empathy. Okay. So here the investigator try to understand the actor's point of view without losing objectivity. He's trying to be in his own shoes also at some time. So again, he can use the secondary sources also. So the validity of the secondary sources, reliability is questionable. So guys, this we can expect as a separate question, and you need to study it separately. Get prepared for 10 mark as well as 20 mark as well. They can ask you, right? So there are certain steps also. Go through the PDF and you will be getting enough content for that. So in this session, when we talk about revision, we won't get enough time to cover this area. So the steps, like there are certain steps for this interpretive process or steps in Verstehen. You need to write again the same. You need to reconstruct the situations of the actor. So when I talk about reconstruct the situation of the actor, for example, a crime, what the police will do, they'll try to reconstruct the situation, right? You identify the context, you identify the choices, and you understand the constraints. So same thing you will do. Okay, so reconstruct the situation of the actor, how and why he performed. Ultimately, what we need to answer is why he performed the action, the meaning that he attached to the action. So you can establish cause and effect. So you reconstruct the situation. When I say reconstruction, identify the context in which he did it, what are the choices which were available to him, and the constraints which he faced. and develop communication equivalence also. You need to understand actors' language, the symbols, or the medium of meanings, etc. And then, very importantly, you need to maintain neutrality so that you can ensure objectivity, avoid any kind of emotional involvement or bias. So you need to remain indifferent to the actor's situation. Okay, and you need to combine observation and dialogue. Use both primary and secondary sources to build a complete understanding. If you are not getting the complete understanding only by primary sources, you can use the secondary sources, you can ask others. So if you follow these steps, the investigator maximize the probability of interpretation or interpreting the meanings correctly. So we will talk about causal pluralism, causal probabilism later. But here, if you follow these steps, you are going to understand the meanings properly, objectively, and the probability of establishing the correct meaning is higher. Now, there is one method, which is method of ideal types. That also we will quickly discuss. Briefly discuss. I give it separately in another session, because why I'm quickly discussing ideal type is just to tell you what exactly is ideal type, because when I talk about social actions, we need to discuss that in terms of ideal types. But ideal types in itself is a separate question. As I told you, it can be asked like Verstehen. Okay, so if we need to understand, social action in a more systematic way, Weber introduced the concept of ideal types. What exactly is ideal type? If I need to explain it, take some time. We don't have enough time. Just telling you what is ideal type. Okay, ideal type means conceptual abstractions. So a pure model is built by identifying the regular patterns of meaning. So when I'm saying social action, we are trying to identify commonly found or regular patterns of action. And any action you see, you will try to classify into certain categories. And what are those categories? That's what ideal types. And that's what we are going to discuss. There are 4 types of actions which are common. There is a pattern. These are 4 types. These are ideal types. I repeat, ideal type I'll discuss separately, because that in itself is a separate question which can be asked in 20 mark also. So again, it may not exist in reality in its pure form, but these are the ideal form. These are the common form. These are the regular patterns. And with this regular patterns, any action you can compare. Ideal types will help you to compare and understand the real action. For example, when we talk about bureaucracy, it's an ideal type that's representing a perfectly rational organization, but in reality, there is no system which is perfectly bureaucratic, right? So these are what is expected. These are what the common forms. So Weber used this method of ideal type to classify the actions into 4 types. What does that mean? There are 4 regular type of actions. There are 4 commonly found actions. There are 4 actions which have some common patterns. And based on the degree of rationality and consciousness, you can define actions into 4 types. And any act you see, you can classify into any of these 4, or you can explain that action with a combination of 2 or 3 or 4, like that. Okay, so let's now quickly look at the social action ideal types. What are the common forms? There are 4 actions: traditional action, affective action, value rational action, and instrumental action. Value rational action or word rational action, instrumental action or Zweck rational action. So let's start with the traditional action, the first one where the consciousness is very minimum. And then we go like this, where the consciousness is higher. So here, traditional action means, as its name indicate, the actions are guided by customs and habits and values. So the meanings are drawn from pre-existing beliefs. So you're touching the feet of elders by paying respect. You stand up when the teachers are coming to the class. So here, consciousness is minimum. You'll do that. You see an elder person, you show the respect. You see a teacher, you stand up by showing the respect. So here the meanings are drawn from pre-existing beliefs. Someone have told you, do this, you're doing it. That's why consciousness is minimum in traditional action. Next is affective action. So here, action are driven by emotions. Affective action. Emotions like love, hatred, care, anger, fear. So it's a very spontaneous action, and these are expressive actions also. For example, hugging someone because of happiness, or shouting in anger, mother slapping a child. These are emotional actions. These are spontaneous and expressive action, and that's what Weber says affective action. Third is value rational action or word rational action. So here actions are guided by a sense of moral or ethical duty. So it's done for the sake of value, upholding value, and not a result, not a goal, right? For example, soldiers dying for the country, a captain going down with the sinking ship. Okay, so that's because of that moral or ethical duty. Fourth one is the most conscious action, that's the rational action, instrumental action, or the Zweck rational action. That's a most conscious and calculated form of action. You are attending this class. It's a most calculated action because you have a goal to crack this exam, right? So it's a most conscious action. Otherwise, you won't waste time by at least listening to this lecture till now. It's a calculated action. It's a most conscious action. You have a goal and you have the means. Attend these classes, increase your knowledge, add some value to your answers, and perform well in exam. So actor logically chooses the best means to achieve rational goals. Cool. So a businessman investing strategically for profit. You, a student who's preparing for UPSC with a planned timetable, looking for certain specific teachers, classes, you know that the value that I'm giving with these lectures. So you're attending these sessions. So these four types will help you to interpret the different motivations behind human behavior. Any activity, it will be explained through these four types or the combination of this four. So in real life, actions are often the mixture of these four ideal types. So now I hope you understood what I mean by ideal type. These are abstractions. These are the commonly seen patterns, regular types. That's what ideal types, right? So if you can classify in these ideal types, that will help you to understand the dominant motive. So it's not necessary that it necessarily have to fit into one type. It could be combinations. Got it? Now, there is one more thing that I need to discuss. Weber always talk about causal pluralism, causal probabilism. That's why you cannot criticize Weber. You identify the cause of something. Someone else is saying that a different cause is there. Yeah, there could be multiple causes for Weber. Causal pluralism. So Weber believed social reality is multi-causal. For a social reality, multiple causes will be there, not a single cause. That means no single factor can explain human behavior. Multiple causes will be there. We will see that in the upcoming theories also. One of the most important feature of Weber's methodology is causal pluralism, causal probabilism. Different probabilities is there. So when we talk about Marx, we saw the economy as a sole cause, but that's not the case with Weber. For Marx, everything is based on economic infrastructure. Weber, it could be ideas, it could be values, it could be culture. All these will shape actions. So he called this approach as causal probabilism, and we can only estimate or understand different probabilities of cause and effect. It's not possible that you'll get absolute laws like natural science. Why? Because there is a famous quote which I've discussed in Science and Positivism also. According to Weber, we are studying human beings studying human beings. Human beings have emotions. This is not matter. So natural science study matter which do not have consciousness. So if you heat water, if you boil water at 100 degrees Celsius, you can predict exactly what is going to happen. So absolute objectivity is possible because you're dealing with matter. If you freeze water at freezing point, you know what is going to happen. So absolute objectivity is possible. You can clearly predict. But human behavior, you cannot predict. Human beings have consciousness, emotions. So plurality of causes may be there. Probabilities is what we can do. Absolute laws is impossible like natural science. So absolute objectivity is neither possible nor desirable according to Weber because human beings studying human beings. Human beings have consciousness and emotions. So plurality of causes will be there. You can only establish probability, but you need to maximize probability. You need to go with maximum possible objectivity. For that, he gave methods like ideal types, Verstehen, etc. So Weber's methodological approach, if you see from this, it stands on four pillars. Voluntarism, that's first one. Every individual has free will to act, right? So that's voluntarism. Then interpretive sociology. So that means understanding meanings attached to the action. Then scientific method. So using scientific methods like Verstehen and ideal type. We discussed both. Micro to macro link, understanding the bigger social structure through individual action. Next theory that we are going to learn is Protestant ethic and spirit of capitalism. How capitalism is established, which is macro reality, through individual meanings and motives and emotions. From micro, how capitalism established. We'll talk about that. So in simple terms, what we have seen is Weber shows the macro realities like capitalism or bureaucracy or religion you can understand through the internal meanings, motives, emotions, or micro meanings of individuals, the actions and the motives of the individual. All the macro realities can be understood. Durkheim gave an entirely different approach. Macro is important. Look at, see, relevance, if I want to talk about, we'll do that in the critical analysis part, but quickly, see, Weber's approach is totally different. He gave a different, transition point to the pure non-positivism also. And you can consider as a kind of revolutionary approach because it made sociology a human-centered and methodologically balanced approach. And he bridged the gap between positivist and idealist or non-positivist. You remember that we discussed already. He borrowed from positivism also, that the objectivity, the scientific approach, etc. Right? At the same time, from positivist, he deviated in terms of what to study. So you need to study the internal aspect, positivist, external aspect. But how you study, you follow positivist. And from here, there's a transition phase. That's why you consider Weber as bridging the gap between positivist and non-positivist. But there are criticism, like it's very difficult to verify the subjective meaning scientifically. And Verstehen depends heavily on investigators' interpretation and then overemphasis on individual motives, and you are ignoring the structural constraints. I may act because of the structural constraints also. That's why later you will see Parson integrating both micro macro, individual meaning at the same time, social pressure, motivational orientation and value orientation. We'll discuss that. But despite all these, Weber remains the cornerstone of interpretive sociology. We will discuss more of criticism, contribution, relevance in the upcoming session. So to conclude this session, we have seen that Durkheim taught us that society exists outside individuals. It's sui generis, it comes into existence its own, and it's a social fact. And we discuss generality, externality, coercive influence, individuality, etc. But Weber taught us that society also lives inside the individual in their meanings and motives. So whenever you see an action, don't just, if you are like, from whatever we understood now, whenever you see an action, don't just ask what happened, but why it happened and what it mean to the actor. That's what Weber said. Why? Establish cause and effect. How can you establish cause and effect? Understanding the meanings attached by the actor. So when you see an action, it's not just about what happened. It's all about why it happened and what was the meaning attached by the actor to the action. That's what transformed a mere behavior to a social action. And that's what makes sociology. And in Weber's words, if I want to borrow, a true science of understanding human meaning is this. And that's how he defines social action and sociology. So guys, I hope it's very clear whatever we have done. I hope you got some value to the time that you have spent here. In case if you are looking for sociology mentorship or classes or test series, can get in touch with us. We'll help you there. So see you guys. Thank you.